Good morning and welcome to another edition of Inside Sources. I'm Greg Skordas, except that I'm not with Holly Richardson. I'm with my dear friend Marua Carabello this morning, president of the Zorro Group. Marua,
I'm excited to be
I
here.
am happy to have you with me. You know, you and I have done so many shows over the years.
That's right.
For various, Inside Sources, KSL at Night. I think it's had several iterations. So, yeah, it's fun to be with you again. And we're talking about the government shutdown. Before we bring our guest in, Marua, surprised?
No, sadly. Right, I want to be surprised, but it's become almost expected. Now, this is the first time in almost 7 years, right? So it's not a regular occurrence. But this dance of are we going to, are we not, I wish I was more surprised.
It seems like there was an easy out. There always is, which is the continuing resolution, not necessarily. And so, which was in this case, let's give us 7 more weeks so we can get this figured out. We'll come back at the end of November, but we couldn't even get that part. We couldn't even get that far.
No, it broke down when I think when I suspected it was breaking down was the White House visit didn't go well. I had a little spark of optimism when the Dems were going into the White House, and when that fell apart, I thought, no, they're entrenched right now, all sides.
And the last time it happened, which was, I think, March or April, Chuck Schumer grabbed a group of Democrats and came to the table because they needed 60 votes in the Senate. He took a lot of heat for that. But what I didn't appreciate, maybe our guest can help us, is what changed with him. And because nothing changed with respect to our country, but he took a lot of heat, and maybe that's what changed. He just didn't want to deal with that again.
Well, I think that's what I had heard and read from some of the Democratic side of the analysis is that they said, we came to the table in March. We gave it another go, we being the Democratic side, and they didn't feel like the Republicans were responsive at that time, so they felt like the rationale I've heard from the Democratic side is to do it again would be silly because we did it in March and it wasn't reciprocated.
Let's bring in our breaking news reporter, Ashleigh Fields from The Hill. Ashleigh, thanks for joining us this morning. And tell us what's happening now. Are there any ongoing negotiations or what are we hearing?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Right now, we know that there's still a standstill between Republicans and Democrats, mainly because Democrats are trying to make sure that the funding that was cut for Medicaid is reversed. And then in addition to that, they want to see subsidies from the Affordable Care Act extended. And as you guys mentioned earlier, this is something that in March they agreed to a continuing resolution and did not see any sort of bending from the GOP lawmakers there. And they're hoping that this time around, by blocking the government from being funded, they can see some movement in the direction of their choosing.
Now, the Republicans, we understand, are going to try for another vote today. What are you hearing as the sides try and rally for another vote?
What I'm hearing is that Democrats have not bended, especially after that AI video posted by President Trump yesterday and a bunch more jokes being made by Republican lawmakers. Right now, they are just pushing to see some sort of movement in their favor. So we could see, again, another vote that lapses.
Ashleigh, what can you tell our listeners about that AI? I mean, it was comical in some ways, but it was also offensive in others.
It was basically a video posted by President Trump that said Democrats had lost their voters. They were not receiving support from minorities like blacks and Latinos, which is the term used in the video. And it was, just really a swipe at Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, saying that they're out of touch with their constituents. So as they continue to try and lobby on their behalf, Trump said this is just some grandstanding before midterm elections.
And Hakeem was wearing this big sombrero, and there's some weird mariachi music in the back. It was, that's what I saw.
Yeah, it was not in taste.
Right.
So this is the $64,000 question that no one knows. But what's the sentiment about how long you think this will last?
Well, right now we don't know, but we, did, as you mentioned, see this continuing resolution put on the table by House Republicans that funds the government until November 21st. And so right now, if they can find some sort of middle line to get, Senate Democrats on board with this plan, then this is something that can, hopefully move forward and ensure that federal workers and employees are, back to being paid. As we've seen earlier, a note from the White House Office of Management and Budget, there could be mass layoffs if the shutdown continues, which is something that I don't think Democrats want to see. So we know that right now about 750,000 employees that are working for the government could be furloughed, and others could be laid off soon. And so there's a lot of uncertainty at this time.
Ashleigh, is it as simple as those two healthcare-related issues, reestablishing some funding to Medicaid and these healthcare tax credits, subsidies to the Affordable Care Act? I mean, is that all it would take? And I know that's not just nothing, but is that really what the Democrats are hoping? Is that the break between the two parties?
That's really what the Democrats are hoping for. But what I'm seeing right now is that if there are some other areas where negotiations work out, Democrats could possibly bend without seeing those two big things happen. We know that Jeffries and Schumer met with President Trump. Didn't go as smoothly as planned, but there were some conversations sort of starting to happen. And that's what we can look for, to see a successful vote soon.
Give us a peek behind the curtain. So, is it mostly leadership talking to leadership? Are there opportunities for other members of the body to build a bridge? Who does this negotiation?
Yes, it's leadership talking to leadership right now. So Senate Majority Leader John Thune has been heavily involved in these conversations, House Speaker Mike Johnson. But then on the Senate Democratic side, you've got some lawmakers who've continued to bend to the GOP party, saying that they don't want to see a shutdown happen. One of those people has been Senator John Fetterman from Pennsylvania. And so as we look to him, he's sort of been the voice for his party of reason, or that go-between between Democrats and Republicans. So he could, lobby some of his fellow Senate Democrats to get the handful needed to make sure that this continuing resolution passes in the upper chamber. But this is all something we have to just wait and see play out, and something we can look to leadership to see if they'll be able to successfully negotiate with one another.
And Ashleigh, we've got about a minute left, but it seems that both sides are blaming the other. Are we getting a sense as to who America is blaming right now? Are there people madder at one side or the other, or are they just mad at everyone?
Well, listen, Karl Rove, I think, said it best in his article for the Wall Street Journal, which is that when Washington shuts down, Washington looks bad as a whole. It's neither side. And so, as you mentioned, I don't think it's the American public blaming Democrats or Republicans, but rather blaming both sides for not being flexible.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think that this is a discouraging moment. Ashleigh Fields is with The Hill. She covers our breaking news. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And not a necessarily optimistic report. I mean, and we're watching the screens, of course, and there is talk going on. They're going to have another vote today. I think the Republicans are going to continue to have votes and say, we're putting it up, but the Democrats aren't supporting it. Of course, the Democrats proposed their bill as well. So
that's right.
There's probably going to be another vote today, and who knows where that's going to go. So the government shutdown that was threatened at 12:01 this morning Eastern Time actually occurred, and it is currently in place. It's automatically put hundreds of thousands of federal workers on furlough with no pay. On top of that, President Trump has threatened to use this shutdown as a way to lay off even more federal workers. The president of the National Federation of Federal Employees, Randy Irwin, says that this shutdown is not only hurting current federal employees, it might stop younger people from looking for federal jobs in the future.
This administration, I think people have seen that they are not showing respect to the federal workforce. They're insulting them, intimidating them, firing them, just messing with them in all kinds of ways. It's going to be hard to convince a whole generation of people that would want to work for the American people, do health research to solve cancer and Alzheimer's, or to be a part of NASA, or all kinds of amazing things that is done in the federal government. You're not going to be able to convince those people to work for the federal government when the bad things that are happening right now continue to happening.
I'm joined this morning by Marua Carabello, president of the Exoro Group. I don't know, that person sort of overstated things to me just a little bit. I don't know.
I mean, what it is interesting that I think the two compelling reasons to do government or public service would be do something impactful for your community and job security, right? Sort of
Right,
this
yes.
sense of maybe I won't get paid as much every year, but over time I'll be treated well in the long run. And I could see where we're perhaps building some cynicism around that. Not so much the shutdown, just sort of how government jobs are sometimes being spoken of.
Yeah, and yes, and that's occurred since the most recent Trump election, when I think Elon Musk sort of took some shots at federal employees,
Right.
And some people jumped on that bandwagon. I mean, I worked for the county. I worked for the Salt Lake County Attorney's Office for 8 years, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And my wife, I'll have to disclose, my wife is a current federal employee. She works for the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. She's now what they call an essential employee, meaning she still has to go to work, but she's not getting paid. My son's a doc in the Air Force, same thing. He still has to go to work, but he's not getting paid. But I don't think either of them are thinking, oh my gosh, how are we going to make the house payment? Maybe they are. I shouldn't speak, but because in the past when this has occurred, and it's not all that frequent, they made up the pay. It seems like they're both not getting paid. I think there is some solace for federal employees, at least those that we're calling essential, that they'll have it made up.
And that's always been the case. It's to be expected. There is a little wrinkle
Right.
the last couple of days where Trump has said, maybe we will use this as an opportunity to downsize again.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll use this as an opportunity to actually fire people.
Yeah, that's tough to think of. And then think about this. I mean, of course, the two examples I gave, the federal courts, the military, but what about like the air traffic controllers? What about the FAA? I mean, they're essential employees and they're working, but with a little bit of a dialed back staff. I mean, we don't have the same. And yesterday we talked, Mara, about our national parks.
Yes.
Who's going to clean them? Who's going to man those booths and everything?
Well, in the last shutdown, I remember there were employees that wanted to go in, wanted to volunteer their time, and weren't allowed. I mean, they weren't allowed in. I read an article first thing this morning about if you're going to the airport in the next few days, these workers are required to show up, but they pointed out that often delays happen because you're not highly motivated. I mean, you're doing it and you need to. I'm not suggesting they're not professional, but that they are rather a little annoyed, a little ticked off, and so one should expect delays if you're traveling in the next few days.
Yeah, and if you're going to the federal court today, it'll look and feel like business as usual, but it's also going to be a little quieter because some of the staff there, let's face it, there's some are not coming, and they're not everyone that is there is an essential employee. But even those that are there are thinking, wait a minute.
Greg, you asked an interesting question in the last segment for me about how are we going to voice our annoyance, or what do we do about it? And I was reading a Maersk poll from yesterday. This is so interesting to me. So asked who we're going to blame on the shutdown.
Oh, yeah.
38% of us said we're going to blame the Republicans. 27% of us said we're going to blame the Democrats. And 31% of us said we're going to blame both of them. So, if you fudge that, it's sort of a third, maybe a little higher on the Republicans. But the interesting question is, how are we going to start putting pressure? I was thinking about this morning. The main job of Congress is to pass our budget. And they have not passed a budget for years. Now, they've continued. They've had a continuing resolution, but they haven't passed a budget. How are we going to get out of this not taking responsibility for having a budget at the federal level?
Right. And you wonder if the administration tried to solve that. This is maybe won't make a lot of sense with the one big beautiful bill and say, okay, let's put this all forward and let's put this around a budget. And of course, you've got budget considerations around that. But I think that Trump may have overstated his case, or at least overthought his case, thinking that, okay, I've got this, everybody's going to pass it and we'll go ahead and we'll have budgeting and everything taking place, when in fact that hasn't occurred yet.
Right. We haven't actually gone very deep into the budgeting process.
Right. And in fact, we're clawing back some of the appropriations we made, which is really making some Democrats mad.
Yeah, and we're not tackling spending. I heard an interesting suggestion from a representative. It was a Republican representative from Minnesota, and I wish he proposed this week. It was voted down, but his notion was if you can't get to a bill in September, that it would automatically lock in last year's budget. that would be an automatic resolution that last year's budget, and we would never shut down the government, but you would be saddled as a department with your last year's budget, which would almost always result in you not having the funding that you would want. And I thought, I loved that it was just a new suggestion. I loved that someone was saying, why don't we try and change our behavior right now?
I maybe you know the answer to this, but I sort of assumed the continuing resolution was based in part on let's just continue with last year's.
Yeah, it is. This would be an automatic. This would be the trick of his piece of legislation was to say this would be the result every September, and you would be held to this budget. So what he was saying is, why don't we make there be a negative consequence to not decision making as a member of Congress? And I thought that was at least interesting because he was trying to change the behavior.
It actually makes too much sense.
I had to reconsider it as well.
The more I think about it, the more I think, okay. Because it's a fallback you can live with, but it's also a fallback that neither party wants. You know what I mean? So you don't pass a budget. Here, we'll pass it for you, and here's what it will be. Last year's budget. And
right.
You've already got it, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel.
So, Greg, do we start feeling this today, do you think? Do we feel the shutdown today? Do we feel it tomorrow as an average citizen? When do we start feeling this?
I think it. Of course, the attorney in me is always going to say it depends. But, I mean, I think if you go to a place like the airport today, you might feel it. You might feel the staff cutback. If you go to some place like the federal court, you may not. I mean, in terms of those of us that are getting Social Security, probably not going to make a difference.
Right.
You're waiting for your tax return, probably not going to make a difference. I mean, I think it depends on what you're doing. I think most Americans won't feel it today, tomorrow, maybe next week. Next month, you would expect something might start kicking in, but I don't know that this is going to go that long.
Well, that was my question. I think there will be a relationship between when we as citizens speak out, so to speak, feel it, and how quickly our representatives feel like they need to resolve this.
It seemed like the Republicans, Mara, were setting this up really well as the Democrats' fault, the Schumer shutdown.
Yeah.
But that poll you just read actually slightly more are blaming the Republicans. And I would say this: if you divided Republicans in Congress and the president, maybe Republicans and Democrats are about the same. But when you add the president to the equation, maybe that's why Republicans are seen as a little more responsible for this.
Well, let's look at this from a strategic point of view, too. The Republicans are in alignment with their messaging and their philosophy, where the Democrats are fighting with each other a little bit about how long the shutdown should go, what they should focus on. So because the Democrats are giving us 2 and 3 messages, where the Republicans are giving us one message, that actually might be an indicator of who we blame at the end, is whose message we hear the most clear.
More votes today. We'll see where that goes.